Shalom, everybody. I'm happy to be back with you. This is going to be our second class of Matan Torah by the Baal HaSulam with Rebbe Avraham Morechai Gottlieb's commentary, who I'll be referring to as the Rebbe Shlita. If you haven't already, check out the first year and the first class, that is, and also highly recommend looking at the description, just reading through, getting a vibe for the mission statement, and checking out the links. Some free PDF downloads for some books and the like. Some good resources over there. So this second portion is among my favorite of Matan Torah because it talks about some very amazing fundamental paradigm shifting ideas. So let's get into it. So it starts off with Hillel clearly said that loving the other is all of the Torah. So we see here that Hillel is in line with Rabbi Akiva, which I remind you said that the entirety of the Torah is under the one mitzvah, under the one umbrella of loving your neighbor as yourself, or in Hebrew, v'ahavta l'recha kamocha. So the Baal HaSulam begins, even if we could strain ourselves and find some way to settle the difficulty in the above statement, we have before us a second statement even more remarkable from Masechet Shabbat 31a from the Talmud regarding the prospective convert who came to Hillel and said to him, "Teach me the entire Torah while I stand on one leg." Hillel replied to him, "Whatever is hateful to you, do not do to your fellow. And all the rest is commentary. Go and learn." Here we have a clear pronouncement that nothing has more significance in all the 612 mitzvot and all the verses of the Torah than the one commandment of, and love your fellow as yourself, because they come only to explain and enable us to fulfill the commandment of, and love your fellow as yourself to its full extent. For Hillel explicitly states, quote, "All the rest is commentary. Go and learn." End quote. That is, all the remaining contents of the Torah are an elucidation of this single commandment, and it is impossible to complete the commandment of, and love your fellow as yourself, without them. This is the essence of Judaism, and we're going to be talking about this matter from different paradigms and really building on this idea as we continue learning Matan Torah. And it's to some degree a broken record, but it's a very necessary one. We need a new education. We need to reenact our systems. The world, to whatever degree, different ideas and opinions out there, is in chaos. And it's clear that we need a new system. And it's very clear, based on our tradition, our Masorah, that we just need to love each other. There's a systematic way to get to that. And it has to do with both being involved in the soul and the body, which is why we have to hit home this idea of loving the other again and again and again until it's at the forefront of our mind when we sit to learn, when we help the other, so on and so forth. So, in regards to, as the Baal HaSulam begins, even if we could strain ourselves and find some way to settle the difficulty in the above statement, the Rebbe Shlita says, regarding the above statement, Rabbi Akiva said this is a great klal, and indeed he shows it to be a great principle, but it still may not be unique, for there are other general principles. This particular general principle might be seen to include as its particulars the interpersonal mitzvot, but not the mitzvah between each individual and God. Therefore, Baal HaSulam quotes Hillel's words to the convert, for there it is explicit that indeed, and love your fellow as yourself, is the general principle of all of the Torah. Then, after having brought the words of Hillel, we must interpret also Rebbe Akiva as having intended that, and love your fellow as yourself, is the general principle of all of the Torah. The Rebbe Shlita also says, in regards to Hillel's statement to the convert, which I'll repeat. The convert first says, "Teach me the entire Torah while I stand on one leg." And Hillel replied to him, "Whatever is hateful to you, do not do to your fellow. And all the rest is commentary. Go and learn. The Rebbe Shlita says, there are 2 levels for the mitzvah and love your fellow as yourself. 2 levels of consideration of the other person. The first, don't do to your friend what is hateful to you. We usually fail to abide by this. For example, we preach to others, although we would not want them to preach to us. No one wants to be told what to do unless we are told by a great person. The second, do for the other whatever will make him or her feel composed. These 2 levels parallel avoid evil, which is the negative, and do good, which is the positive. I also think that this is my comment on the side here. I think it parallels yirat, being fear, or a better translation would be like awe or reverence, and hava, which is love. Yes, the negative and the positive being avoid evil and do good. But in regards to yirat and hava, being awe and reverence and love, it's related to both taking care of others, assuming that we look at them in the most exaggerated way that we had learned in the first lesson. And if they are imagined within our consciousness as someone important, then we're going to treat them with awe and reverence. And we're going to be fearful, so to speak, of being able to harm them, let alone separate any type of connection with them. All the more so, with the Creator, we don't want to misalign. We want to be connected to Source, and we have awe and reverence of His infinite grandeur if we get to even taste or feel a speck of it, let alone to not want to disappoint our Heavenly Father. So because fear is like a reverence and an awe, it's kind of taking a step back and saying, I don't want to hurt, I don't want to upset. And anyways, fear, awe, reverence is like one is trembling, one is kind of put. Whereas love is action. Quoting the Rebbe Shlita in a separate source, this is actually later in Matan Torah, perhaps in a different Maimar, a different article or essay. Quote, the Baal HaSulam expanded on the Torah's language of loving others and used the expression giving to others. His intention is that love needs to be expressed through action. I think this is also very much hit home by Rabbi Avraham Yitzchak. Zatzal. There's a very viral video called Fish Love with him in it. He also references fish love in his book, The First Year of Marriage. And he brings the case of the Kotzker Rebbe, Rebbe Mendel of Kotzk, who's a great Hasidic Rebbe and spiritual master himself, who did not sway from the way of truth whatsoever. Very adamant to staying on a straight road. So I will read an excerpt from the book, The First Year of Marriage, where Rabbi Twersky Zatzal brings this idea. The latter concept of love is illustrated by the comment of Rebbe Mendel of Kosk, who saw a young man enjoying a tasty dish of fish. Why are you eating the fish, young man? Rabbi Mendel asked. Rather surprised by the question, the young man responded, because I love fish, that's why. Rebbe Mendel said, and is it because of your love for the fish that you took it out of the water, killed it, and cooked it? There was nothing wrong with enjoying fish, Rabbi Mendel said, but don't fool yourself. You do not love fish, you love yourself, and you wish to satisfy your desires. It is out of self-love that you killed and cooked the fish. Hitting home the notion that the Torah concept of love, which is our goal of loving the other as ourselves, is far different from the secular concept of love. And he ends his explanation in the video, Fish Love, which I recommend looking at because he gives over the story much better than I. And he says, it's less about we give to whom we love, more about we love to whom we give. hitting home again the notion of we have to express the love with action. As the Rebbe Shlita says here, we have to do for the other whatever will make him or her feel composed. The Rebbe Shlita continues. According to this, why did Hillel choose to present to the convert the negative side of, and love your fellow as yourself? That is, don't do to your friend what is hateful to you. Why didn't he tell him directly the positive side? One answer is that the negative side is more understandable. It fits better into the usual mindset. For anyone can appreciate that whatever is hateful to oneself is certainly not something that one should cause another. However, it's much more difficult to understand that I have to get up and do something for others the way I would do for myself. And since we are dealing with a prospective convert who wants to take on the religion of Yisrael, Hillel started him out on the easy path. But he said to him, you've got to complete also the rest of the Torah, for the rest of the Torah is an elucidation of this. Hillel relied on the light of the Torah to gradually show the convert the required development of an individual to get to the complete realization of, and love your fellow as yourself. Regarding the convert's saying, quote, teach me all the Torah while I stand on one leg, end quote, there are many meanings. Oh, this is amazing, the Rebbe Shlita brings down. The simple meaning, teach me briefly the essential principle of the Torah. But there are other meanings. Human beings walk on two legs. One leg is called afflictions. The other leg is called pleasure. For afflictions push us away from one state to the next, and pleasures pull us toward them. I think an easy example for this in the material world, when someone is in pain, when someone is in a depression, God forbid, they want to change their state of being. They're in a negative frequency, a negative state of consciousness, and they need to shift. So the pain is literally pushing them from the back, so to speak, to make a change and go to a better state of being, a higher state of consciousness. Whereas, if someone was to meditate or think on a new home or a new car, the pleasure of meditating and imagining that reality in the future pulls one towards it. And someone gains the koach, they gain the strength to be able to achieve that. So too, I think there's a beautiful idea with the current corona matzav. I think that's a matter regarding corona, and that things have become a lot more simple, at least in the Jewish world, seemingly hopeful that things have become more relaxed and we become more inside. And I've just heard the Rebbe explain in multiple places that Hashem wants us to go inside. He wants us to go to our homes and connect to our families and go inside the Torah and the inner dimensions, and therefore go inside oneself, start correcting oneself, and doing this beautiful, sometimes bitter, but very sweet self-work that bears the greatest fruits of merit. And as we explained in the first shir, the first class, the greatest merit one can ask for is to be refined, to get closer to the Creator, meaning to become closer like Him, giving, loving, and altruistic. So we say in the wintertime during our daily prayer service, Mashiv haruach umorid hageshem. Mashiv is from the language of shev, which is to return, like tshuva, is repentance, meaning to realign. And ruach is wind, meaning he returns the wind. But ruach is also from the language of ruchnius, spirituality. Umorid is from the language of yeridah, a descent, a decreasing, a lowering. Geshem. Geshem is rain. It's raining right now. Thank God. Could use it here in Israel. Meaning the descent, morid, of Geshem, which is from the language of gashmias, materiality. So in this insert, The deeper idea is that we're realigning, we're returning to ruach, meaning ruchnias, to spirituality, to giving, to loving, to true, authentic work on the self, a different type of education that we have than what we have in the world today. And more the geshem, to decrease materiality. What's more important? Spirituality, materiality. Beautiful. I've heard that from the Rebbe, Shlita. The Rebbe continues. Thus, the concept of walking is a physical illustration of the abstract concept of transition from one state to the other. In general, our development is dependent on our ability to operate with two opposite forces. But the convert, in accord with his nature as a novice, requests Hillel to teach only one side of, and love your fellow as yourself. The more natural side. That's the idea of one leg. And this is the leg of afflictions. Namely, whatever afflicts you, don't do to your fellow. This is alluding to the spiritual principle of arvut, or mutual responsibility, mutual guarantee. There's actually an essay called Arvut, which is the immediate essay after Matan Torah. They're really supposed to be read together. They're intimately related. And maybe we'll learn that once we're done with Matan Torah. We'll see how things go. But under the notion that we're all one soul, we're all in the same boat, there's a spiritual principle that the microcosm and the macrocosm are like 2 drops of water relative to the beyond infinite, incomprehensible creator. So the macro, the individual, you are like a drop of water, and then the entire 8 billion people in the world are also just a drop of water relative to the infinite ocean that is the one and only. But this is also meaning to say that if one speaks ill of others, God forbid, like lashon hara, or they hurt someone physically, emotionally, in any way, they are shooting a bullet in the bottom of the boat when it's a cruise ship with 8 billion people, 8 billion other people on the cruise ship. Meaning, if you hurt someone else, you just hurt yourself. Because it's all one. We are all one. Easier said than done. Let's continue. Similarly, our sages said in Masechet Pesachim 50b, a person should always learn even without pure intention, or in Hebrew, lo lishma. That is, you should start with the side within Torah that is more natural to you, while your direction should be to lift yourself up slowly from the nature of self-love. There is a common idea that I used to have as well in Judaism, I still have it day to day, that I'll do it when I have the right intention. But this is a foundational spiritual principle to our work. It's okay if you don't have the right intention. You're not supposed to. None of us are. We should be real with ourselves and know that we're beings of ego. Our raw material is the will to receive for oneself alone. And we're here to refine. So we have this notion in the Torah. We tell the Creator, Nasi v'nishma. We will do, then we will hear. We have to do first. As Nike, if I could reference Nike, just do it. You do it, and then you'll receive. Then you will hear. You will experience. So for those that say, I don't want to take this on, or I'm not so ready to maybe jump into the pool of Torah and its mitzvot, I hear. You don't feel like you have the right intention yet, but it's okay. You're not supposed to. We all want reward. We all need to start somewhere. Slowly but surely, we'll get to an amazing reward. That's a lot of literature written on it, and God willing, we'll touch more on it as we continue to learn. Continue with the Rebbe Shlita's comment. Actually, the same convert also went to Shammai, whose defining nature is the attribute of judgment that allows no compromise. When the convert put him to request for compromise, being one leg, Shammai pushed him off with his measuring stick used for building that was in his hand. For Shammai's building was founded on the basis of absolute truth. The translator adds, truth and measuring stick are spelled in Hebrew with the same letters. And the Rebbe Shlita finishes the paragraph, not relative truth that adapts to a certain situation. Which is why Hillel was more relevant, because Hillel was the mixing and the intertwining between compassion and judgment, perfect balance, where Shammai was just strict judgment, this is the way it is, not budging. Hence truth and measuring stick hitting the convert or the aspiring convert. But it's so amazing that truth and measuring stick are spelled in Hebrew with the same letters. And it's one small example in an infinite pool of examples in the Torah of the interrelationship between everything and how everything in the Torah, and the Tanakh really, is written in code. It's all code. And it's a shame for those that haven't had exposure to the code of gematria or in a relationship of Hebrew root letters and how everything is just, wow. Let's continue. This is actually the description in the Midrash in which our sages teach, quote, in the beginning, the Holy One, blessed be He, created the world with the attribute of judgment. He saw that the world was not viable this way, so He brought forth the attribute of mercy and combined it with the attribute of judgment. From Midrash Rabbah, Bereshis, or Genesis 12:15. Also Rashi's commentary on God created, being Borah Elohim, in the first verse of the Torah. The story of the convert illustrates the saying of our sages. For in the beginning, the convert comes to Shammai, that is, he tries to convert on the basis of the aspect of judgment. But after he sees that this is not viable, that is, that he cannot receive direction of this sort from the start, then he turns to Hillel, who represents the combining of the aspect of mercy with the aspect of judgment, by virtue of his willingness to accept a relative truth that matches an individual's spiritual state. I'd like to say that everything is relative, especially with spiritual growth. I quote the Rebbe Shlita, since every person's experience of God is unique, the revelation of God sparkles like a crystal with a multitude of colors. And another quote, God is revealed to each of us in a unique way. There's no comparing, there's no looking at anyone else. We're all one, we're all in this together. At the end of the day, it's oneself and the Creator. I've also heard the Rebbe say that one should imagine that everything outside of oneself is the Creator. Just in different clothing, in different garments. Whether it's inanimate life, plant life, animals, humans, etc. It's all one. Eino movado. There's none else besides Him. There's nothing else besides Him. This next part is the most exciting for me. I think it's the sweetest part of this section, if I could say such a thing. And it's the biggest paradigm shift, in my opinion, for what the Torah is and how it works and how it relates to us. The Rebbe says, according to Torah, Dirishut Hayachid, the translator adds and defines, the method of interpretation that sees all aspects of the Torah as descriptions of the inner workings of the individual soul. So I'd like to say that means every place, every person, every event, every word, let alone every vowel in the Torah is describing you and I, everyone. It's a personal story. It's a map of our spiritual progress. It's a spiritual roadmap of our elevation of consciousness. A simple example of this. Land in Hebrew, eretz, has the same Hebrew root as ratzon, will, desire. We understand, al pi Kabbalah, through Kabbalah, that land is intimately related with ratzon. So when the Jews, let alone any individual in the Torah, is traveling from one place to another, it's describing a shift in consciousness from one desire to the next. Because desire, will, is foundational to our being. We're comprised of will. We have a will to receive or a will to give. We're trying to develop our will, develop our desire to a higher nature. So it could be that when one wants to travel, it's one thing to want to say, I want to go with my friends and build brotherly love and appreciate and be in awe of the Creator's amazing creations, being mountains or the expansive sea or the beautiful plains and forests and life, whether plant or animal. That's good. What I'd like to challenge is the notion of, let's say, a vacation. People need to take a rest. Everyone takes breathers. But if someone wants to go on a trip, someone wants to go backpacking somewhere and just escape, it could be that that is a branch of the root. The root is that we are comprised of a soul that wants to travel up the spiritual ladder back to its source. Because every branch wants to be like its root. We want to go back to the Creator. So it could be when someone wants to travel here and there, that's a very material and respectable, but material expression of their soul's desire to reach back to the Creator. So it's manifest in the physical world as, I want to go to different places in order to change my state of being and elevate my consciousness to one of more tranquility, peace, enjoyment, fun, etc. But we're here to elevate our desires. So instead of desiring to travel to a place, and right place, right time, there's definitely a time for that. We should prioritize traveling up the spiritual ladder, traveling in our states of consciousness. I think that's going to be more conducive to our happiness. I could be wrong, but that's what we're taught. So I'll read again. According to Torah, the Rishut Hayachet, the method of interpretation that sees all aspects of the Torah as descriptions of the inner workings of the individual soul. When we want to be converted, that is, to undergo a transformation of the character of a non-Jew to the character of a Jew, we must turn to the Hillel within ourselves. The translator adds, each of us, Jew and non-Jew alike, are born with the inclination to receive for ourselves, referred to as the non-Jew within us. And each of us has the potential of developing an inclination to give to others, referred to as the Jew within us. Rabbi Gottlieb is interpreting the encounter of Hillel and the convert as instruction regarding the manner of converting the non-Jew within to become a Jew within. The Rebbe Shlita continues, even a Jew who keeps Torah and mitzvot and is careful with seemingly insignificant details, sorry, lost my place. Seemingly insignificant details, as long as he or she has not arrived at and love your fellow as yourself, which is dependent on advancement in faith or emunah, then he or she is nonetheless still considered a non-Jew. That's bitter. The translator adds, of course, Rabbi Gottlieb is writing from the point of view of inner meaning. He is not contradicting the approach of Jewish law. Thus, the inner meaning of the symbol of a non-Jew and the symbol of a Jew is that a non-Jew does only what accords with natural self-concern and nothing out of love for the other. And also he or she does only what accords with reason and nothing on the basis of faith. Whereas a Jew is one who becomes merciful and giving towards the other and is also able to operate on the basis of faith. Thus, we are not discussing a historical story, but a description of a spiritual process that each individual must undergo. For everyone must want to undergo this conversion. Everyone must want to turn to the Hillel within, which is that potential point of holiness. within each person. Each of us must connect with that point, reveal its light, and begin to live according to the principles of that point. Whether you're a Jew or a non-Jew watching this, I would not take these terms personally, meaning this is referring to the deepest inner meaning of the word, because Yisrael can be split into two words. Yud Shin Resh is Yashar, meaning straight, and the second word is an Aleph with a Lamed, which is one of the names of the Creator, an expression of ultimate mercy. And I'll pronounce it as Kale as opposed to the beer that some people like, out of respect and honor for the holy name. So Yashar Kale, in the name itself, Yisrael, it is denoting the notion of being straight to God, meaning all of our actions is for the sake of loving the other, whether the other is God or the other is human beings, and seeing the God within the human beings, because there's a spark of Hashem within all people. So with this definition, it could be that a lot of Jews who are Torah observant, maybe even most, considering they haven't reached this exalted spiritual state of consciousness, but the deepest meaning of the word of Yashar Kel, Yisrael, are still not Jewish. And I would posit it's a bitter truth. I'm still trying to be Jewish. But in the deepest sense of the word, I'm not. I'm trying. I want to get there. I am Jewish by law. If your mother's Jewish, you're Jewish. But it's a process, slowly but surely. And it says regarding how non-Jews are only going with reason and nothing on the basis of faith. I touched on this concept in the last shir, the last class, regarding how one has what he has. We have our own reason, our understanding, our logic, but because it's linked in the self and we are intrinsically flawed as our composite being, our essence is perfect, it's the soul, but our composite in the moment is needing refinement. So we must undergo this refinement process and rise above our reason understanding to be like the Jew, as the Rebbe says here, to be merciful and giving towards others. And I think a good point regarding what holiness is. Holiness in Hebrew, kadosh, kadesh, is something that's unique, separate, distinct. We say about Hashem, kadosh, kadosh, kadosh. We call him the ultimate uniqueness, the ultimate separateness, the ultimate elevated being. What is it unique from or distinct from? It's distinct from the will to receive for oneself alone. Our initial nature is egoistic, so to become holy means to be separate from that, to be unique from that, to be giving. Chamor in Hebrew, a donkey. Chazal say, our sages tell us that man is born a wild donkey. Chamor is the same spelling and same root as chomer, meaning clay, dirt, or raw material. Meaning our raw material is like a wild donkey. Our raw material is animalistic. Our raw material is the will to receive for oneself alone. And we can refine that animal, refine that donkey, and come to an exalted state of being Yashar Kel, Yisrael, and go to the point of God that's within all of us. So the end of the Baal HaSulam's paragraph that we're learning here is, that is, referring to all the rest of his commentary, go and learn, all the remaining contents of the Torah are an elucidation of the single commandment, and it is impossible to complete the commandment of, and love your fellows yourself, without them. Rebbe Shlita says, it is possible to arrive at loving the other only if there is a foundation, preparation, and building by means of the rest of the mitzvot. And this is the only way to understand and love your fellow as yourself, and to get to the state where we can fulfill it. The upshot of the matter is that we have no freedom to subjugate or change any Torah or rabbinic mitzvah, or even the slightest bit of any custom founded by the great teachers of Israel. For this entire web, when taken together as a whole, is meant to change us. And it is a divine document that cannot be tampered with.
It must be fulfilled in all its forms and levels in order to arrive at a spiritual uplifting above the prison of the desire to receive and toward the freedom of love of the other. We're enslaved to our ego. That's the whole matter of Egypt and leaving Egypt. Yetzias Mitzrayim, Pesach. Mitzrayim is from the language of tsar. It's constricted, it's narrow, because receiving for oneself is a restricted lower consciousness, and giving is infinite, and it's freedom. Chazal tell us, our sages tell us, when man has 100, he wants 200. When he has 200, he wants 400, and it never ends. It's a basic spiritual principle, and that's why if we were able to give to everyone in the world, we wouldn't be able to live our 120 years and give to all 8 billion people. So relative to the people that exist in the world, my ability to give is infinite, but my receiving is constricted. I can only receive so much. And we see clearly by examples of celebrities and athletes and people who have it all, they really have nothing and go down a dark road because they're not feeding their soul and they're not connected to the life of all lives by giving and loving and refining themselves through the Torah, Jewish or not. Regarding freedom, the Rebbe says, when we are in a state of giving and believing, there is no limitation. As no being or situation in the world can cause us to feel limited when we want to give. Therefore, the consciousness of giving is called freedom. That's what it means to be free. To be able to truly give without any self-concern. The Rebbe Shlita continues. A parable for this. Someone builds a building, and the building is made of many parts. The foundation, the pillars, the bricks, electrical tubing, etc. Each part with its particular official standard of quality. That is, a certain accepted standard that the contractor must abide by. If the contractor begins to change things according to the contractor's understanding, which means according to the contractor's own interest, woe to whoever would live in that building. Beautiful example, beautiful parable. The Creator wrote the official standard of quality. It's the Torah, it's the blueprint. And he told us to follow the rabbis, and the rabbis are greatly spiritually refined, hopefully. At least Chazal were, that's for sure. And they gave us a basis to live our lives and to refine ourselves. And there's an excessive amount of literature that proves the essence and quality of Torah and its ability to refine us. And we want to take those plans and change it. And it's an unfortunate manifestation, but it's clear that other movements and changes in Judaism that veer away from the Torah and its mitzvot do not bear fruit in terms of refinement or lasting fulfillment, let alone even scratch at reaching a level on the spiritual ladder. Because we're told explicitly that we must do it through Torah and mitzvot. So if we're not holding by Torah and mitzvot, then what do we have? The Rebbe Shita ends saying thus, Baal HaSulam states here that all of the Torah and all of its mitzvot, all its sections, stories, and legends, all exist for the sake of transforming our nature from the nature of self-love to the nature of loving the other. The Torah comes to explain to us this idea on the level of thought and to cultivate a mental transformation, but it must conclude with the transformation also in our behavior. We'll end here. Thank you for joining me. Again, please check out the description and check out the links. If you have any questions, my email should be at the bottom of the description. And till next time, wishing everyone all the best. Wishing everyone a Laila Tov, a good night or a good day, wherever you are in the world. And be well. Enjoy. Life is good. Life is great. There's so much to be thankful for. All the best.